All right, welcome to the Ohio State of Mind podcast. I'm riding solo as captain today. The ship. Michael's out getting his a tux suit or something for a wedding. So this is your host Josh Keatley. With me is, dude, you're the host of so many goddamn podcasts. Colby Dant, the host of the College Football Experience, the UFL Gambling Podcast, the CFL Gambling Podcast, the College Basketball Experience, which is a real shame that Michael's not here for that because he has no one to talk about basketball with. The College Baseball Experience, and then Stadium Heads is your new one, right?
Yes, myself and Michael Barker, and thanks for having me on the show. But myself and Michael Barker, who is I think better known to the world if you know college sports as College Football Campus Tour, where we basically just talk about historic college football stadiums and why college football is the greatest thing ever to hit planet Earth.
You know, all your podcasts are great. They're all great. They're all super entertaining. I love listening to you rip on Patty C. And you guys got such good rapport and NC Nick. All your podcasts are great. But the UFL Gambling Podcast, for anybody that is looking for UFL content, for the love of God, check that podcast out. You and CJ are so funny. And J Mark has the patience of a saint, dude. When you guys rip on him for the zero-turn mower 2 weeks in a row, like – and he just sits there in silence. It's one of the most informative UFL podcasts. You guys are up to date. It's one of the longest too. Most of these podcasts are 30 minutes. No one touches on the gambling. No one touches on the odds. It's super informative. I mean, I'm killing the UFL, and you guys are a huge reason why. So, big shout out to that podcast specifically.
Well, thank you, man. And look, when the zombies come, J Mark's gonna be fine. That guy lives in Iowa on like a fucking ranch, and he's just he's more of a man than me, dude. It's like, you know what I mean? Like he tells me things. He's like, I'm doing this. I'm putting it. He's pulling like a Larry Bird, put in a driveway for like his 10 acres of real estate that he owns. I live in an apartment for the past 20 years in Los Angeles, and I feel like such a pansy in regards to him. What have I done? You know what I mean? Nothing. I do podcasts. That's what I do. You know what I mean? Like this guy he's fine when the zombies come. I'll also take him to beat me in a Royal Rumble. But appreciate you plugging me, man.
Oh, dude, he said he was mowing with the zero turn. There was a slight pause, and then you're like, "What? It doesn't turn?" And he about it for 20 minutes. 2 weeks in a row.
I got like 20 DMs on like, how the hell do you not know what a zero turn is? I was like, man, I live in the concrete jungle, man. Like I haven't pushed a lawnmower since my mom's front yard in like 1999 or something. You know what I mean? So like, and that was just the push lawnmower. But I mean, look, I want to get. I just had a son, so my dreams are now to find out what a zero-turn lawnmower is and to have a yard. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and I wouldn't have found it so funny, but I was listening to the NFL Gambling Podcast, and J Mark's on that, and he was with somebody, and I try to support you guys, try to support all the shows there, and he was with somebody, and they butchered like they were going over NFL free agency, and whoever he was doing the show with butchered every single name. Like Sion Taki was like, they butchered and J Mark he didn't say anything. He just sat in silence. And then after it was his turn to speak, he'd correct the person, be like, "Oh, it's Sion Taki." And then he'd give it was just, he's just so patient with you guys when you guys just give him shit. It's so funny.
Hey, I'll say this. As I preview every team on the College Football Experience with a solo podcast, and hopefully you'll be kind enough to preview Ohio State with us. But when you get to BYU in Hawaii, I need a whiskey. I need a whiskey just to like, you gotta be, what I've learned is like, if I'm just confident, it doesn't matter how wrong I am. The audience buys it because you get to some of these Polynesian names and it is, dude, I think it's one of the hardest exercises you could do for any form of public speaking, so, but
look, Mike is the same thing because he's the recruiting expert on the show, and there'll be guys that are rated, and he'll say their name, and I'll be like, "Man, I feel like that's not their name." He'll be like, "Yeah, it is." I'll be like, "All right, I'm going to start saying it that way," and then I'll go up to the press box, and they'll have the sheet that tells you how to say his name. I'm like, that motherfucker made me change the way I said it. I was like, the whole goddamn time. I can't remember who it was most recently, but he was just like, "Yeah,
early on, I felt like I was like, people would second guess me and be like, "Did you even watch a BYU game?" And I'm like, "Man, I watched all the BYU games," but I'm like, I still, as matter how many times you hear it, when you go to read it, it's hard. So like that, I learned like, hey, just be confident, because the minute you show weakness, they come for you. Like, you don't even know what the names are. If you're confident, they just buy it and they're just like, yeah, this guy knows his stuff.
Yeah. No, I feel you, man. You know, and so I cover Ohio State, go to every home game, and I still butcher JT Tuimoloau like that.
Yeah,
Every
me
time
too.
I say it, it comes out super weird. You know, the only name that's questionable that I've never messed up on is Jackson Smith and Jigba, because I feel like if you mess up on that name, you're damn close to saying something you shouldn't. So that name I paid very close attention to as I learned how to say that. But let's rock and roll. And what were we gonna say? I'm sorry.
No. I'm just saying, watch the whiskeys when you're pronouncing his name when he's having a big day. You got to limit your whiskeys.
Yeah. But we're gonna dive into the Ohio State schedule. Like I said, you are the resident gambling expert. For anybody that's familiar with my work on Buckeyes Wire, Colby was the gambling expert that I interviewed earlier in the offseason about Ryan Day and his status as a coach, and we're gonna talk about that on this podcast as well. And thank you for that, by the way, too. That article was a big hit. Got a lot of questions, a lot of feedback on it. A lot of people agreed with your stance, which I was surprised about. But again, we're gonna cover that. But if you don't mind, I'd like to go over the roster and what your thoughts are on the roster, because as an Ohio State fan, surrounded by Ohio State people, surrounded by, guys like Michael and myself who are we went to Ohio State, diehard Ohio State, we're not seeing the issues with this roster. And I want someone to open my eyes a bit. So what do you feel? We can start with the offense if you'd like. What do you feel is their biggest strength, their biggest weakness, something maybe Ohio State fans are wrong about that you're seeing? What are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, I haven't been able to say anything negative about Ohio State wide receivers since my life ever started, I believe. Like, I feel like they're just always loaded. So I will say they're fine there. I'm very intrigued about the running back room. Like, I grew up, Ohio State's been dominant lately. I mean, maybe not super lately as far as, your rivals. I won't say their name, but in general, like, to me, there was an era I feel like we're somewhat around the same age, where Ohio State always had that bell cow running back. You know what I mean? So like, I love the fact that they went out and added to an already really good running back room, in my opinion. And I'm very excited about that. I think the big question marks, and I was just talking with a buddy about this, I think a couple days ago, not even thinking about this podcast specifically, but I think that the real thing is the quarterback situation. You know what I mean? Like, I am a fan of Will Howard. I am a fan. I'm basically a fan of every Kansas State quarterback, but it's different than what Ohio State's had recently, in my opinion. Now, he has really worked on his accuracy. A couple of years ago, I feel like he was more just almost like a runner that could kind of get by passing, but I feel like last year he really surprised me with his development. But I'm fascinated by seeing if will he be the guy? I think he'll be the guy, but how Chip Kelly uses him, that's another thing. Bringing in Chip Kelly, and because he is a running quarterback at the same time, like kind of like a power running quarterback at times for Kansas State, and that to me is the one. I know there's are we sold that he's going to be the starter? Because I would just assume, why would you transfer there if you didn't think you were going to get that spot, knowing he's such a veteran? And I know USC toyed with the idea of getting him.
Yep.
So I almost feel like it's promised to you at that point. Now, yes, you want to have open competition. Yes, I know Julian Sayin coming in from Alabama is someone that people have been raving about, and you still got a couple guys that were there last year, but is that a for sure thing, do we think?
I feel pretty confident. I've always been a big Devin Brown guy. I've been buying stock in Devin Brown since he got here. I feel like he has similar juice to some Ohio State studs from before. I don't want to compare him to like a guy like Dwayne Haskins, but a guy who can move when he needs to move, but can also throw a very pretty ball and shows no fear. And I like that. And Devin Brown has a attitude that's kind of infectious. He's a fun guy to talk to. He's a fun guy to be around. I don't know Will Howard like that, so I'm biased towards Devin Brown. In my eyes, but I think that you're right. I think that Will Howard is going to be the dude, because I think Ryan Day is, and this is coming not just from my mouth, but from people that I also talk to that are closer to the program and closer to, Ryan Day as a human being. He can be a little political. He can be a little bit, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. He's more of like, I'm going to stand by my guns. Like, hey, I told this dude he's going to play, so that's what's going to happen, right? And that's fine. I just, from my money, I'm not sold on Will Howard. I think that what you said has made me feel better. But to me, a lot of Ohio State fans are focusing on the offensive line and the offensive line issues. I'm not focused on that at all. I'm focused on Will Howard. I don't think Kansas State even wanted him to stay there. Right?
Yeah, I think you're correct. I think you're correct there in a way. That's what I'm saying. Like, I like him as a player, but at Ohio State, the question is could you have gotten better? Does he fit your offensive system? Which I don't know that he does. Now, just because I don't picture him as like a drop back passing quarterback was super accurate. I mean, I don't want to say he's not accurate because to me he took a big step from 2 years ago to last year and really proving to me that he's becoming a much more decent quarterback as far as old school quarterback. Like what we picture as a great quarterback. But at the same time, like I was pretty surprised. I know there was speculation about Cam Ward coming in, and that one made a lot more sense to me. But at the same time, with Chip Kelly coming in, and that's something that happened, I believe, and you would know this better than me, but I believe Will Howard came first, Kelly came second, right?
Correct. Yep.
That's an interesting thing though, because I almost think Chip Kelly might be able to be better with Will Howard, than Bill O'Brien. So to me, I actually think that the shoe kind of fits a little bit more now. But back to my original point though, is like I am fascinated to see if that works, and I'm fascinated to see, but the whole team, as far as especially the offense, I think, like you just said, I know the offensive line. Some people have questions about it. Okay, I would say maybe that would be the second position, but I think coming into it, the one that stands out the most would be the quarterback spot. And another thing is, Ryan Day might be doing this in spite of we saw Dave Aranda. I like Dave Aranda, but he was very noble, much to his detriment. I believe it was 2 years ago when he said, he named the starter in spring. I think even before the spring game or right around the spring game, and Drones transferred to Virginia Tech, and then in the first game of the season, Blake Shapen gets injured against Utah, and your backup quarterback's at Virginia Tech now. So, some of these coaches, I do think, it may be an a-hole move, but I do think you can't reveal your hand until after the fact. Because Dave Aranda's on the hot seat right now. He might not make it through the season. And I guarantee you, had he had Drones sitting there in the second string, they'd probably make a bowl that year, and he's probably fine right now. So you got to really think about this.
I don't see. I think that if that happens, if that is the reason why, I would assume that I could place that blame squarely on Chip Kelly, because that just doesn't feel like Ryan Day's vibe. From what we know about Ryan Day in the past, he's always announced a starter as soon as possible. Last year was the first year he didn't. And I think we kind of know why. It looks like both those quarterbacks, and I want to be very clear. I don't know how familiar you are with the show. I'm one of the bigger Kyle McCord defenders. I think that Kyle McCord was a great quarterback. I think that Kyle McCord made a lot of mental mistakes, and I don't blame Kyle McCord for that at all. We've had conversations on Twitter, and I even messaged you. This is Ryan Day's fault, right? So I want to be very clear about that. But the fact that it took that long makes me kind of think, he did not like the hand that he was dealt last year. I think that he likes his hand better this year, but I think that delay might be caused by Chip Kelly now being involved. And Chip Kelly, as we know from last year, that's a guy who likes to sit and wait. That's a guy who does not like to be rushed, and he will wait. And sometimes he waits too long. I mean, he took him 5 games to figure it out with UCLA last year, right?
100%. But I will say this though, I think Will Howard in his system, it probably fits his game, pretty good. You know what I mean? As far as like Will Howard's game, and because I'm like you, like I said, I like Will Howard because to me he's a gamer quarterback, and I hate in this day and age. I feel like there's so many times you see quarterbacks that are like afraid to play. Will Howard plays, but sometimes he can make mistakes. But I that's why I found it very interesting. I was a bit surprised because I thought there was other quarterbacks out there that fit Ohio State's offense more from their stud wideouts to obviously, and then I guess at that point, because the transfer portal situation, what I don't think you had Caleb Downs at that point. I don't think you had Judkins at that point. But
no,
I mean, dude, it's a great time to be an Ohio State fan, I believe, because this roster loading, getting those guys, you're just like, oh. I mean, I'll be honest, the Judkins one, I'm confused. I was like, what? I was like, what's going on? Like, what? And then I'm like, I guess, maybe it makes sense for him because if you're splitting carries, you save your shelf life in the NFL some because running back shelf lives are so short now. But that one came out of left field to me.
Yeah, that one shocked us all.
He's a stud, though.
Yes, absolutely. And as the story has gone forward and more things have kind of been trickled out, it kind of makes sense what happened. And this leads me to one of my questions about, I was going to ask you about the offensive line, but basically what my understanding is what happened with the Judkins situation is Lane Kiffin is the portal king. He loves calling himself the portal king. It's to the detriment of his current players. I think that, I think you would agree with this. There's two types of programs. There's the program that keeps their NIL in-house for majority, right? Ohio State brought back JTT, Denzel Burke, Jack Sawyer, even though they brought in those very, very impressive transfers, a majority of their cash was probably spent in-house. Ole Miss does not do that. So I think Quinshon Judkins was kind of looking for my turn, and they were like, no, we got to go get these 32 guys. And at that point, he's on the phone with Davison Igbinosun, who's already at Ohio State. Next thing you know, he's in Columbus. Is basically kind of how I heard.
I do agree that I think Ohio State handles that correctly, and I think if I was in charge of a university, you got to take care of what's got you there in the first place. But Quinshon Judkins, I got an opportunity to see him in person, and I was just taken back. I was like, whoa, he's better than everybody on the field. And for Ole Miss to drop the ball with that, see, I'm not actually shocked that he transferred. I am more shocked he transferred because Ohio State was already fine in the running back room, and he chose to sit there and say, "I'm going to split carries." Essentially, I think that makes it awesome for Ohio State fans. But I would have thought Alabama would have been on the phone because Alabama seems to me like, I know they have highly recruited guys, but they don't really have someone that's proven it to us. That's lot true. Of other schools, you know what I mean? There's a lot of other schools that I think you could sit there and say the running back spot, they could, potentially, I mean, the guy is a very, very talented running back. Like if I had to rattle off like top running backs in the nation, he would certainly be in the first few that I would name. So
same with Travion Henderson too, I assume, correct?
Both. Yes. Both would be 100%. And Travion Henderson comes from Virginia. I know, I grew up in the Washington DC area, so I know a lot of Hokie fans are still upset that he went to Ohio State. So, but he's a stud too. I mean, the first game I saw him play, I was just like, okay, Ohio State's they're loaded again. So, but that was shocking to me. Judkins going there, and I think it's a very exciting time to be. And look, I know that a lot of people say, well, Michigan, the other team won the national championship, and this is. I love it. I love when I don't love that they won. I'm not going to come on your show and say that, but I love when I get to sit back as a guy that gets to watch college football from a bird's eye view and has for most of my life. I love seeing the arms race because that happens. Then it's just like you see it with like Texas or Texas A&M too. They go back and forth. Oh, they're going to build this. Oh yeah, we're going to build that. You know what I mean? So like right. In that regard, I love Ohio State going all in now. Financially, I mean, going to a lot of people say like they went out and bought a roster. Now their roster was already awesome. Let's be honest. Yeah. Short of one game over the past couple of years, and had there been a bigger playoff, some of those years, who knows what happens. I mean, if that field goal goes in, and they win a national championship, they would have beat TCU. So, you know what I mean? Like.
And I that's one thing too on your podcast, and that's again I urge everybody to go listen to the College Football Experience podcast, because even if you disagree with what you have to say, the points that you make are so eloquent and they make so much sense that you kind of have to rethink your thought process about it. And when Ohio State backed up, and I think those were your words, they backed into the playoffs that year. I do agree with that, right? So it's. That brings me to my question about Ryan Day later on, but I do want to kind of put an asterisk next to that statement, like, oh, well, they would have been that shit, because it's like, well, would they have, like, because things kind of really bounce their way, right? I mean,
I mean, look, but we my point is like we know Ohio State from a talent perspective. There's not, and I know you're an Ohio State guy, but I'll tell you this from a neutral point of view is like they're always one of the most talented teams, and that's what I like about the chance of a big playoff. I know Ohio State fans will agree with me by saying they've challenged themselves much better in the non-con recently than Michigan, and you wonder if that was to their own detriment. Because unfortunately, like I think we should encourage aggressive scheduling, and unfortunately, in a small 14 playoff, that doesn't bid well for you. So I just think in a bigger system, I think you're going to see more success from a program like Ohio State.
Well, let me ask you, let's go back to the quarterback conversation, because you said some other quarterbacks in the transfer portal might have been better fit. And I do agree with that. Obviously, it was very, very clear that Ryan Day wanted Dillon Gabriel, and Dillon Gabriel wanted to go to Oregon, right? It's very clear that was his first target. Then there was some of the waters are muddy, but it looks like there might have been some situations where they were really hoping Michael Pratt was going to enter the transfer portal that didn't have, use his COVID year. That did not happen. Then Cam Ward comes into play. That ended up being where there was more coming from Cam Ward's side than Ohio State's side. And now I don't know what your thoughts are, but in my eyes, I think Cam Ward is a better quarterback than Will Howard.
Certainly to me, especially for Ohio State's offense. Like, to me, maybe if you're Notre Dame or something, maybe you can make the case that like Will Howard might fit their offense. They play more conservatively, but knowing the wideouts you have, and knowing the speed you have on that offense, I thought Cam Ward was a home run for them. I actually, Washington State gave us our first big break here at SGPN. Mike Leach and stuff invited us up there, flew us up there, and then I'm always part. I didn't want to see Cam Ward leave Wazoo, because they're already getting the horrible treatment of being like whatever you want to call it, Pac-2, G5. And my heart breaks for them. So I was like, when I first saw, because before he went to Miami, I just saw like speculation he's going to go to Ohio State. I'm like, oh, damn, like I wanted him to stay at Washington State, but I understand that the nature of the beast and the business, but I certainly think he's better than Will Howard. From an accuracy standpoint, and another thing is like he's really impressed from a while. I watched him in the FCS too. Like he's been good for a while. So. I would certainly say that Mariota, I think, had something to do with Dillon Gabriel. They're both from the island. I believe Marcus Mariota was like his childhood idol, and he I think had something to do with it, because he also gave him his jersey number for him to go to Oregon.
Did not know that. So there you go. Yeah. That makes the Dillon Gabriel thing make a little bit more sense for me. Now, tell me, okay, so now here's my justification for the Will Howard situation. Now, this is where me being a biased Buckeye fan comes into play, right? You root for one guy, the other thing happens, now all of a sudden you're a fan of that guy, right? My thought process is because Cam Ward wanted to come to Ohio State. Ryan Day hadn't wanted to be part of it. I talked to numerous people that are close to the Cam Ward situation. I guess the guy's a little bit of a wild man, and he makes it very clear he's a little bit of a wild man. He's went through a couple agents already. The agents are all very aggressive as far as gimme. And Ryan Day was like, no. My thought process is Cam Ward is too YOLO. He throws too many YOLO balls. In my eyes, Kyle McCord is a physically more talented quarterback than both those guys. So to me, it was very clear that he was done. He didn't want to. It didn't matter physically what was going on. He wanted a quarterback that was going to be consistent, reliable, and intelligent. And I feel like Will Howard, maybe he doesn't have all the physical stuff, but he has all that stuff going for him. All the immeasurable, intangible stuff. Is that just me justifying it because they missed out on the studs, or do you think that there's some merit to that?
I think there's some merit to it. I mean, the only thing is the reliability thing, because I feel like Will Howard gets injured often. But other than that, like I think there is something, I love Kansas. I've said it earlier. I love Kansas State quarterbacks because they normally get gamers to me. You know what I mean? Like they're normally like, Josh, they're football players to me. It's not just like they're quarterbacks. Like they're going to lay you out on a block if you come back from the days of Michael Beasley to, Colin Klein and stuff. Like I've always loved.
Yeah, for sure.
Yes. I'm like, these are football players. They're not going for the statue that's going to sit back there and say, well, I just throw the ball. You know what I mean? So, but I was a little surprised but I'm very intrigued. I think that's and especially now that the Chip Kelly thing happens, I think that's even more exciting. If for a Buckeye fan, I think that could be a good fit, man. And his mobility and the way that you put so many great chess pieces around him. You know what I mean? It's going to be hard for someone to fail. I'll be honest, even if it was Devin Brown, which I love too, because he wears the number 33, Sammy Ball style. I think in general, it's going to be hard to fail with this many great players around you. Obviously, it's going to come down to a couple big games.
So last offensive question, then we'll move on to the defense. Well, now I got two more offensive questions. You mentioned Chip Kelly. Like you said, you're well versed in the world of college football, much more than I. Right, my focus is pretty much on the Big Ten. One of the comments that I kept getting was, "Hey, Chip Kelly sucked at UCLA. Chip Kelly sucked at UCLA. Chip Kelly sucked at UCLA." And my pushback has always been, first of all, he didn't suck at UCLA. Last year was really the first year that they looked pathetic, and I think a lot of that was because he couldn't pick a quarterback. Other than that, they've always been tough teams, which is what Ohio State has always lacked, right? The rant against Lou Holtz is pretty much proof of that, right? And on top of that, they didn't start to go down a cliff. He was building something there, and then the world changed as far as NIL goes, and Chip Kelly's not going to kiss babies. Those days are done. The days of him getting on his knees and begging for money from boosters are done. Right. So I think that kind of contributed to the downfall that we saw there. But you never watch a Chip Kelly game and go, what is he doing? Right. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And he still went 8-5. I mean, it's not like a horror, like at UCLA. I mean, for Ohio State fans, right, that's a horrible season. But look, UCLA is one of these, they've been a mystery for a long time. I have Randy Cross on our show all the time that played at UCLA back in the 70s, played with Dick Vermeil and stuff. And, he's always been agitated at UCLA. They haven't really put football first, unfortunately, because they really don't have an excuse, in my opinion. If you go to the campus, it's a gorgeous campus, and they should be a lot better, frankly, in football and basketball. Lately, at least basketball, historically, they've been great. But I've never been able to understand why UCLA is not better in football. And Chip Kelly, I think, was fighting a battle where the administration doesn't really care about it, and that's got to be frustrating. Chip Kelly was at Oregon. Chip Kelly, was in the NFL, and he had great success at Oregon. And I can see, why he would be frustrated, because at Oregon they do put football first. Ever since Phil Knight made a bunch of money, they started putting football first. So I would push back. I pushed back out here in LA that people thought he was a bad coach. I said, I don't understand. Like I understand maybe he could have been better recruiting. But I also think his personality, I know we saw LaShawn McCoy say some things about him on a podcast, him and Deshaun Jackson, but maybe he's not the most outgoing guy, but I believe he knows football very well. And I think he's a good football coach. And I think UCLA is worse off without him as their head coach. So I think it's, it'll be interesting to see. I don't know that we've ever seen him with this much talent. I mean, Oregon at that point, when he was at Oregon, he had some talented guys, but I feel like they almost had like a little of the Boise State in them, of like undersized guys that they were playing way above their level. But it worked. What's that?
That's exactly what we were on the show. I had the show a couple weeks ago. We had someone in our comment section say, mention, well, Chip Kelly's only good if he has elite talent. And I said, well, he's the only elite talent he's ever had was Marcus Mariota. The other guy, who? Dennis Dixon, like Garrett Blunt, because all that
Dennis
speed
Dixon was like a 3-star, I think, if memory serves me correct. And
all that speed that we thought he had, all those guys went to the combine and ran a 4.5, 4.6, right? Wasn't LaMichael James like a 4.64 guy?
Yeah.
It turned out that it wasn't actually the elite speed. It was that he was able to put those guys in position. So I agree with you 100%. I still can't name an Oregon wide receiver from that era.
That's what I'm saying. Like it's I would disagree with their assessments. I mean, maybe they landed. I'm trying to remember. I think they might have had a good corner or something, or that They had a couple guys, but it's still, come on. Like Oregon, I remember them playing. They should have won the national championship against Auburn. They should have won that game. If that guy's not down, I kind of think they were the better team that game. But that's Chip Kelly. I think is an underrated coach. I think he gets a raw deal a little bit. I think a lot of it has to do with his NFL tenure. But
still wasn't that bad. Too.
I know. That's what I'm saying. Like, I guess the Niners year, but I mean, come on, that team wasn't they weren't set up really well to win, in my opinion. But
he was also the GM.
Yeah,
that's kind of fell apart.
That might have been part of it too. Sometimes you bite off more than you might have been a little too ambitious, but no, I'm very excited to see it. As someone that loves college football, I think it's a fascinating development when the head coach of UCLA leaves to be offensive coordinator at Ohio State, and then the fact that obviously his connection with Ryan Day, I think it makes it for very like I can't look. I'm always excited for the season to get here, but when we get team specific, I will say Ohio State to me is one of the most interesting teams. Not only because I don't circle just teams that can win the national championship. It's the storylines within the team to me, and like whether it's Will Howard or whether it's Chip Kelly. And like I said, I think it's going to work. I think their continuity is, I think a good thing with Ryan Day and Chip Kelly knowing each other, for a long time. So,
let me ask you one. Where I'm going way over the time limit. I thought it was going to be about the offense, but I want to ask you one more question about the offensive line because I think it encompasses a lot of other things. You guys talk about the transfer portal a lot on your podcast as well. A lot of the messages that I get about the offensive line, people are unhappy. Like, why didn't they add somebody? Why didn't they add somebody? Why didn't they add somebody? But I grew up in an era, and you did as well, where when you were returning all your guys, that was a good thing. If your line was average last year, which they were at least average, they weren't bad. They were at least average. And all those guys returned for another year, they should be good. Like, I come from an era where development and returning starters mean something. Josh Fryer was all Big Ten last year.
And you look at your rivals, you know what I mean? Like that thing, it's got to eat at you. It's got to eat at you, all off season, I would imagine. And to me, those guys were all somewhat highly recruited players, at least that I can recall. And they bring in the kid from what was it, McLaughlin, I believe, from Alabama, right? That's another one. He got a raw deal. I thought, I know he was having issues snapping the ball, but I think he's certainly a talented player that can excel. But yeah, I'm with you. I think continuity, and I'll be honest, I think continuity among the offensive line still really matters in college football this day and age. I think that's something. Obviously, if you're at UTEP or something, it's a different game. But I'm saying, like at Ohio State, when you're recruiting on a national level and these players are talented, and let's not overreact. You lost. I'm not going to count the Missouri game. You lost one game by 6 points on the road. All right.
Right.
Relax. You know what I mean? You're there. You're right there. And another year of development and another fire matters, and especially in the game of football. So like you watch your rivals have a successful season and they got the best of you. And I think that's great that you're coming back. And, I think that this is, bulletin board material all off season. You're going to have that fire, and then guess what? They're going to have less of a fire. So I think that I don't worry about the offensive line, especially with those running backs too.
Do you think that the state of college football does emphasize? Do you think that returning starters are as appreciated as they were before? Because I just feel like that was such a big deal. That when back in the old days, when I would crack open a Phil Steele, that's the first thing you look at. How many
100%.
How many dudes are back, right? You know what I mean? And I feel like that's kind of been. I feel like it's just as important. But in the eyes of the media and what we're hearing, and the average fan that's listening, they don't talk about it as much because the focus is so far about the transfer portal. But it's like, does that make sense what I'm saying? Would you agree with that? Or
I would certainly agree with that, especially when it comes to offensive line to me, or line of scrimmage to me, but specifically more so the offensive line than the defensive line. And, I will say it's kind of a little bit of both though. Like, I don't even want to say we ridicule, but I guess some would take it as ridicule with like Dabo Swinney not using the portal. I respect it. I don't know if it will work, but I think there's a medium. Yeah. I think there's a medium though of like, if you have a glaring weakness,
Yeah.
Which I don't think I would I don't think I would say Ohio State had a glaring weakness on the offensive line. I don't believe. I mean, some people might believe that they see Michigan and that they see I don't know that I'm fully on board with that statement of saying they had a glaring weakness on the offensive line last year. Now maybe maybe it didn't live up to their standard. That's subjective, but I mean, I don't know. I feel like. But yes, I still pay attention to continuity. Now I will say like it's a little different on like skill position players. Like to me, if it's wideouts, I don't know how much that really matters to me.
Really? That's interesting.
Yeah.
Because I kind of was thinking, their relationship with the quarterback, they're getting comfortable. But yeah, I definitely agree with you in the fact that I would emphasize it more on the offensive line. Those guys got to mesh together, gel together, figure each other out. But anyways, let's move on to the defense. This is where I think Ohio State really shines for the first time in a long time. But I want to hear your opinion on it. Is your overall stance on the Ohio State defense and their expectations?
I mean, I feel like Jim Knowles. I mean, first off, he came through last year. How about that? I thought the defense was very impressive, and then obviously you get Caleb Downs. Getting and I love it because everyone had him going to Georgia, right? Everyone had him going to Georgia. Getting Caleb Downs and adding him to this defense, like I said, this is the year to do it. I'm super excited to watch him, and I think Knowles is. I think I might have been a skeptic a little bit after year one there, and then I was like, okay, but how he was so good at Oklahoma State, so clearly the guy knew what he was doing, but. I can't wait to watch it. I think this is going to be this is the unit that I think is going to be able to really be the difference to me in them potentially winning the national championship.
Yeah, and I think and correct me if I'm wrong, because you're much more familiar with Jim Knowles' game before he arrived at Ohio State. But when it felt like he was trying to take, for instance, Jack Sawyer was a guy that he tried to make the Jack guy or the bullet or whatever, the stand-up guy that was in coverage and here and there. And, Larry Johnson talked some sense into him this past offseason, so they kind of got rid of that. And I think that was the big step forward. Instead of having, because you don't need to do that at Ohio State because these guys are 5-star recruits. They're not tweeners. They're not fringe guys. Jack Sawyer is a 5-star first-round caliber defensive end. And thank God he played as a defensive end last year, not that weird stand-up position, because he's clearly one of the best pass rushers in the Big Ten. It might be on the first round, so I think that might have been the biggest factor for the improvement is that he stopped right. He adjusted his weird defense away from that weird star position or whatever it was. But
I feel like, at Oklahoma State, you probably had to patch a few more holes. You kind of had to, for lack of a better term, Mickey Mouse it, you know what I mean? Of like, hey, we're going to figure out, and then it worked for you. So you're like, hey, you come in and then, obviously you didn't have the year you wanted. And then don't overthink this. You know what I mean? Maybe you have that moment where you're like, wait a second, I'm overthinking this. We got studs. What are we doing? But yeah, I was glad to see that too. And I mean, the defense should be, and you know what? I'm really excited about that. Cause to me, when you think of Ohio State football in general, to me, growing up in a day and age where like they always had guys like, when I think of football for the most part, like, you know what I mean? Whether it's Spielman or Katzenmoy or like, I picture like great defensive players. And for a couple years there, I do feel like it kind of got, even though they still had some good guys that made the NFL and stuff, it just didn't seem that dominant. And Ohio State should be dominant defensively always, in my opinion.
No, I agree that I don't think any Ohio State fan would ever dispute that because they haven't had a dominant game-changing defensive end dominant game-changing defender basically since Chase Young. Chase Young was that was quite some time ago. He's on his third NFL team. You know what I mean? And that was one guy. But yeah, it's been a long time since, as far as linebackers go, it's probably been since Ryan Shazier that there was just an absolute animal at the second level like that. Defensive backs have always seemed to be doing pretty well, but Ryan Shazier, dude, that guy's been out of the NFL for 5 years. You know what I mean? Like that's a long time. You're talking. So I'm with you. I don't think any Ohio State fan would dispute that.
And even the secondary, I feel like for a little bit there, they got torched a couple years ago, and I was like, man, they normally have always like great safeties and corners. I could throw out a million names. You know what I mean? So. I feel like for whatever reason that defense a couple years ago, I think it was maybe 2-3 years ago, wasn't a normal Ohio State defense to me.
Yeah, you're right. Coombs was at one point. Coombs was in charge of the defense, and that's kind of when everything kind of went to crap. Seven Banks was a starting cornerback, and he was kind of the first one to take advantage of the NIL. Even had the stupid EFT or NFT thing. Ends up getting benched for Denzel Burke, a freshman who didn't even play cornerback, and then transfers to LSU. Cam Brown was another guy who was a starter, ends up getting benched, transfers out. And then there was Marcus Williamson, who was another starter, ends up getting benched, transfers out, quits the team, puts a bunch of stuff on Twitter. Now he's robbing banks. You know what I mean? Like that was a big deal. That was the three starting cornerback that year, and none of them did anything.
Interesting career decision. Should I keep playing football and make millions of bucks, or should I just go straight to the source and rob a bank? You know, I understand the logic, but unbelievable. But yeah, I mean, Ohio State to me, that identity started to show last year, and it started to get back to what I know Ohio State football to be. You know, because to me, no matter what, even though they've had always great offensive players, to me, I always picture Ohio State as like a gritty, tough defensive team, and to me, that was missing for a little bit, and I think it's key that they got that back. And I think this year that's something that I think they'll have again this year. And I think that, you know, what they have returning mixed with what they've added in the portal, they could be as good as any defense in the nation.
Okay, I agree with it. I love it. I gotta ask you the tough question. See if you've changed. I think I know what the answer is going to be because you already told me once. But I'm gonna see if your stance changes. Is Ryan Day on the hot seat, and would you, if he loses to Michigan, it doesn't win the Big Ten, are you firing him?
If I'm the athletic director, no. I mean, unless I know, unless I had a situation where I knew it was just a gigantic home run, which I don't know that it is. You see what USC did with Lincoln Riley. I'm not sure that's going to work there. And then like I just saw the tax stuff come out. They're a private school, so you don't normally see the contracts and stuff, but they're paying them a lot of money, and I don't necessarily know if that's gonna. I think they're like a 7-5 team this year when I look at them, and they bought out. Now I know they needed a change from Helton, but they bought him out. They threw a lot of money into Lincoln Riley, including his house and everything they bought for him. So the thing is, you better know what's that?
I always thought Lincoln Riley was a bad hire, anyways. He didn't win. He was more flash than substance in my eyes at Oklahoma, right?
Well, and at the time, like no one in Texas was way down. He caught Texas when they were way down, and then they're more talent. They recruit way better, and they frankly just put football first over a lot of those other schools at the time in the Big Ten, and probably still Big 10, Big 12, and I think that he got very fortunate because I think he might be fired this year, man. They have a new athletic director, and that's always shaky when you get a new athletic director. But my point is, back to Ohio State, is that you need to have a full plan. Like to me, Ryan Day, he's pretty darn good, man. Like it's just that Michigan game, and to me, if he doesn't get it done, I understand all of Columbus will be burning down like right at the pipe of like, hey, let's get rid of this guy. But
I'm in the minority. I'm in the minority. Like when we have this conversation and the chat comes in, not typically, but you would be surprised. Most of the time people say I'm being too harsh because I would have fired him by now. In my opinion, I guess this is my question to you. You said that this is the best roster. Well, I guess technically you didn't say that outright, but you believe this is a national championship caliber roster, right?
To me, the only one you could argue to me would be Georgia. Like to me, like they should win the Big Ten. To me,
right? And I've always said the playoffs are a crapshoot. If Ohio State gets in there and they lose the first round of the playoffs, it's kind of like anything could happen. Maybe you're playing Ole Miss at home and somebody gets hurt, whatever. But Michigan, they got a new coach. They're completely decimated. They have no quarterback. They've lost all their starters. Their defense is still very good, but that offense should be hot garbage, right? Their best player is Donovan Edwards, who has, his knees are older than mine at this point. You know what I mean? Like this should be. The schedule's not going to get any easier. They got two hard games, Oregon and Michigan, in my opinion. So if they don't win the Big Ten, if they don't beat Michigan and at least go to the Big Ten championship, in my eyes, I don't know how you could look at his resume because it's really, I know he's a good coach. I understand that. There's lots of good coaches though. Glenn Mason was a good coach, but he couldn't ever win the big one, right? Who was the guy before Chip Kelly at Oregon? That guy was
Bellotti, yeah.
He was an okay coach. He had Keatley Smith those years, right? But he wasn't a great coach. Is it possible that Ryan Day is just Earl Bruce reincarnate?
I mean, look, it's to me, you just have to, like, if you knew Urban was coming back, okay, that's one way. I know that the drama might be too much, but I'm saying, like, we know he'll win, and there's not many that, I guess if you want to pump new life into the program, get people excited, but to me, it's like Penn State. They might fire Franklin. People say, you talk to Penn State fans, they want Franklin out, and I get it. He's like 4-16 against Michigan and Ohio State, right?
Yeah,
but I'm a little more on board with that one than I am Day.
Oh, I agree with that too.
Yeah. But I don't know, like you'd have to have to me, like, if I'm the athletic director of Ohio State, and to me, let's say they I don't know, go 11-1, lose to Michigan. And then you have the playoffs and you lose in the first or second round of the playoffs. Is it an underwhelming year? 100%. But I would need to know who do I really think could do better at that position? Because to me, like, there's not many that I like. I would have to really take a long look at the coaching list. Who's available? Who could we get? I know it's Ohio State. You have endless money and resources, especially with that new Big Ten contract. But, if you told me, like, if you put Lane Kiffin at Ohio State, I don't think he wins those. You know what I mean? Like, if you put, I think Ryan Day's a better head coach than Lane Kiffin. I know a lot of people speculate that Kiffin could be the next Florida head coach or something. Yeah, but I'm saying, like, I'm not a big crystal ball guy. He just got paid. So, like, to me, like, there's a lot of you better make sure you have someone that is legit. And to me, there's not many.
I guess in my eyes, when I look at a guy like Jamie Chadwell, like, that guy has games where he beat teams that, in my eyes, that's what I want in a coach, is someone who beats the guys. Ryan Day gets a lot of credit for his record, right? Oh, he's only lost 4 games. I know, but 90 of those games were against Akron. You said it yourself.
And you should win those games. And Ohio State, you should win all those games. So I understand that, but Chadwell would be one that I actually think would be if you're going to build a list worth the risk. But the question then is, would the athletic director have enough balls to bring in a coach at Liberty? Because normally you like to see at a P5 first, I would say, or P4, but to me, you just got to make sure you hit on it, because to me, I still think Day's better than a lot of other coaches. And another thing is, Day could pull a Calipari. He might just leave with the pressure. You know what I mean? Like, Calipari in basketball, Kentucky fans were so sick of it. They're like, but he read the room. Calipari's like, man, I go out to eat, someone's gonna spit in my sandwich. You know what I mean, or whatever. He read the room. Was like, you know what, I will leave to go to. So maybe that's a situation that happens if that was. But in my mind,
I think he'd rather be in the NFL. So I think that could be the situation.
Let me ask you this one though: what if the offense is fantastic, and that happens? You lose that game. Do you hire Chip Kelly?
I don't think you can, because
it's Day's guy, right?
Well, it's not really necessarily that. It's first of all, he's already kind of proven he don't want to do this shit no more. College football has the extra shit that you need to do as the head coach now.
Yeah. It's horrible.
But and if he didn't like kissing ass at UCLA, he ain't gonna like kissing ass in Columbus, Ohio. You know what I mean?
Can't you just hire someone to do that at Ohio State? They put football first at Ohio State, obviously. And I just feel like, can't you get like a CEO guy? Like, you're seeing this a lot in college basketball, where you hire essentially, and you're seeing it in college football too, I think, where you hire more so of like a CEO. It's almost like a general manager. You figure this stuff out. You can politic. I could focus on the X's and O's. And I feel like at UCLA, they were just late on the curve on any of that. So he's just like, you know what, fuck it, I'm out. So I don't know, that's the way. And I'm just saying, like, to me, he has a resume. He's coaching national championships. Yeah. And to me, that would be an interesting one because I'm trying to rack my brain of who could you get? Who could you get to
one of the reasons I throw the name out there like Jamie Chadwell's because, I grew up when Ohio State hired Jim Tressel. You know what I mean?
That's true. That is true.
They went down to the FCS. You know what I mean? Like, we're seeing. I wanted Ohio State. If they were me, I would have fired him last year and got my hands all over Kalen DeBoer because that's the best coach in college football, in my opinion. But that stuff doesn't bother me. But I see what you're saying though. I really truly do. And I don't the CEO thing. I don't know. I get the financial and economic stuff. I don't know. I'm too stupid to understand what these guys do. All I know is that Ryan Day has to have a smile on his face when he goes. I know that Ryan Day, they have some stupid event at Ohio State every goddamn week where you have a dinner with the coaches for like $7 million, or you shoot hoops to the coaches, and he does it every weekend. Every weekend he's put a goddamn smile on his face, and he goes down there and he cashes that check, and he puts it right back in the football program. It's all the NIL stuff. Is Chip Kelly going to do that? That's the part. You know what I mean? Like, can you send a CEO to do that? Because those fans want to see the head coach.
Fair. And you guys just hired Ross Bjork, right? The
yes.
Texas A&M athletic director. He's the guy who hired Jimbo Fisher, though. So beware what you wish for. Beware what you wish for in that regard. But I mean, look, at Ohio State, you're right though. Like it's. I actually think it's one of the more compelling things too, is that you're at Ohio State. You have Ohio. You're a national brand now. Like even before, I feel like 20 years ago, I'd say you're in the state of Ohio. There's great talent. Now I'm like, well, dude, you're Ohio State. You know what I mean? Like you can go get anybody, and you should be able to get it. Year in, year out, you should be fine at recruiting.
They own the Big Ten and the rivalry for 20 years. I mean, Jim Tressel and Urban Meyer. I mean, dude. I mean, when Jim Tressel was the head coach, they were the national championship every goddamn year.
Yeah,
they lose.
Yeah,
but they were.
But still. I mean, dude, that's what I'm saying. So, like, to me, I do get that side of the argument of like, because I honestly, and this is where I've played devil's advocate and be like, hey, could you put? Let's just play devil's advocate and say, could you throw, I don't know, just some random coach? Could you put Jonathan Smith or could you put Bronco Mendenhall or could you put
Bronco Mendenhall? I would take Bronco Mendenhall.
Yeah, I think he's a fantastic football coach. Like they would probably have a similar record, if not better. So in playing devil's advocate, I probably think they would probably have a better record, or at least Mendenhall.
Yeah.
But what about like Lance Leipold? If you told me you had Lance Leipold, I would be intrigued about that. I would be like, okay, maybe we sell the house on this and do it. But I would just don't mess this thing up because that I do think, you're still going like 11-1 every year. You know what I mean? Like
it can be. Oh, it can definitely get worse. I understand that it could definitely be Rich Rod era Michigan where you're losing.
Yes, like. Love it. Love the shot at it. And and Utah was a mid-major too that went up to the big house and got that dub. And obviously the App State one. We will do that. We will throw salt in the wound still. But like I someone asked me on a show. I was reacting to, I want to say it was it Sports Illustrated? I don't know. They have someone released their top coaches, and they had Steve Sarkisian at number 3. And they asked my reaction to that. And I said, I would not have him at number 3 because I think I know that you have to play the CEO role at Texas because you have a million boosters. But my point is that the question I posed was similar to that. I said, if you threw Jonathan Smith or if you threw Bronco Mendenhall, I forget what coaches I named, I actually think they might win more. You know what I mean? Like, I think it just matters, what you have going. I think a lot of it also is your athletic director, Yeah,
and there's so many variables in college football today too. It's really hard. And I understand that, right? It's not all Ryan Day's. A guy like Steve Sarkisian or like even like I think if it's a bad example, but like a guy like Steve Sarkisian, I agree with everything you're saying, but it's like those off-field variables, it's like I don't know how to measure it with some of those guys. And I understand. And that's the risk you run with Ryan Day as well. But the problem with Ryan Day that makes it different in my eyes is that when he got the program, it was up here and now it's slow.
Fair.
It's Larry Coker in it. You know what I mean?
That is a great comparison, actually. That is a great comparison. Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
Larry Coker got that championship though, so actually we'd be very lucky to have that.
Well, I think that this year, man. Look, I don't know if you guys are your listeners are gamblers. I would encourage that, but I think you buy a future right now. Ohio State's going to the playoffs, man. There's no way they're not going to the playoffs this year.
No, they're going to the playoffs.
Yeah, there's no way they're not going to the playoffs. And to me,
games, right?
I can't even see a scenario where they lose 3, man. I really can't. They lose
to Oregon, Michigan, and the Big Ten championship. I guess you wouldn't make it at that point. Let's say you did, though. They'd still get it.
Okay, right? But yeah, I guess. And to me, Michigan's an interesting one just because I don't know how good they'll be. Their schedule's they have Texas in the non-con. They actually scheduled a good team in the non-con. Crazy. And then you have. To me, Oregon would be the only team that I think would strike fear this year. I mean, Penn State's. I need to see it from Penn State. Drew Allard didn't look like the answer to me, so I think it's a shoe-in for the playoff. Is Ohio State, and Will Howard could get injured. I still think they're a shoe-in for the playoff, and I mean, why they should have the first round bye, in my opinion. They should have that first round bye, even though I almost think if you're a fan of the team, you want the home playoff game. I think this is so great for the sport to have a home playoff game. That's why you should go to 16, just because that. I mean, how great would it be? How great would it be just to catch a playoff game at the Horseshoe? I mean, that would be. Come on, that's bucket list right there.
Well, that's why I thought Notre Dame. Like, I was like, no one's talking about how great this is for Notre Dame. Benefited the most. And
I agree.
Mike, the show with us, he's like, well, they can't get a bye. They can't get a bye. I'm like, they don't need a bye. They're going to play Liberty. In Notre Dame. 100%. What do you mean they don't need a bye, dude?
That town is going to make like $10 million off that weekend. You know what I mean? Probably more than that. You know what I mean?
Like, nice warm-up game, man.
Yeah, and to me, it's going to get crazy ratings, which will help sell players to come there. You know, I mean, you don't need to do that at Ohio State, but I just think in general, they're gonna. I would be very shocked if they did not get the bye week. You know, the only one, like I said, I only think Oregon, but Oregon would have to beat them in Indianapolis, and I don't think that would happen. I think Oregon could get them in Autzen. I don't think they can get them in Indianapolis, but I don't know. They're loading up, though. I will say Oregon's loading up too, quietly, in my opinion. I think everyone's talking Ohio State. Everyone's talking Texas. I think Oregon's been a little more quiet about the roster they've accumulated in the portal, specifically with what they've recruited.
Well, let's dive into that. Let's dive into we're not going to go through the entire Ohio State schedule, but there's 3 games. Obviously, the spreads are released. You're doing them on your show right now as you speak. I think your last episode was week 7.
Yeah.
So. But lightning round here, Oregon is a 1-point favorite with Ohio State. I would take Ohio State. I think Ohio State beats Oregon. I understand what you're saying. I agree with you saying. Oregon's a great team. I think there's only 2 teams on the schedule that have the same quality of talent, and Oregon is one of them. But Oregon, the problem I have with Oregon is that they lost so much on that defensive line that I don't know if they're going to have. I just feel like the trenches are so important in the Big Ten, and I don't know how they're going to. You know, I don't know how it's going to work.
And I don't have their schedule in front. I believe they have to play at Michigan too. But look, here's the thing: Autzen gives you an edge. Like Autzen is a legit, to me, like one of the harder venues to win in. So, but I could see Ohio State still winning that game. Like I think it's like truly, I kind of see it as like a coin toss game. But to me, can Oregon take care of business on the road? And that's they have to go to Michigan, and that's where I really think like that could be a body blow. You know, you go up there to Ann Arbor. Like I don't think Michigan's is going to be nearly as great as last year, but they're still going to be a solid team. So that could be a loss. I'm trying to think off the top of my head because I don't think they go to Penn. They don't get Penn State. I still think they're going to be the number 2 team in the Big Ten though. If I had to place a wager, I think Oregon. I think Oregon might even beat Ohio State in Autzen, and then Ohio State beats them in the revenge match.
So you're taking Oregon then? Right now, gun to your head, you got.
I would, yeah, I guess I would. I'm okay. I would set the line at Oregon -1. I think that's fair because of Autzen.
You know,
because of Autzen. Yeah.
I talked to a guy, George, if he's listening, shout out. He's one of the largest Ohio State memorabilia collectors in the world. I'm talking like he's got Jesse Owens gold medals and shit. And he goes to every Ohio State game since, like, I don't know, the beginning of time, basically. But I asked him, I said, "You decided to go to Oregon?" And he said, "I will never go to Oregon again. I would rather go up to visit Ann Arbor 13 times in a row than go to Oregon." Because those people,
why was that? Because it's just insane, right? Like
when they were throwing bottles of shit at or piss at him too. Like he said, you would just be usually
that every time you go to Oregon with the homeless they have. Let me tell you, you go to Portland. You're walking down the street. Someone might just randomly throw shit at you. So
confusion that you thought they were rabid fans. They're just regular dudes.
That's just life in Oregon. He didn't understand that. No, but Austin, even Keith Jackson, who I know didn't, I mentioned this on my show. And it's funny because someone said like he's an Oregon alum. No, he's not. He's a Washington State alum. Keith Jackson, the departed, historical college football announcer. Whoa, Nelly, but he said like that, and I think there was a coach too that said this. That who was it? Someone played there. I'm drawing a blank right now, but. So there was a legend. No, it was Lloyd Carr. Lloyd Carr said that was the loudest stadium he's ever experienced. As far as now, maybe that was a subliminal shot at Ohio State or something. I don't know. But Keith Jackson, I mean, dude, it's a crazy environment, man. It is a real crazy environment. So I do think I would probably, like I said, that's anyone's game to me. I think Oregon will be like that. Some of the guys they brought in, like Evan Stewart from Texas A&M. I went and saw A&M when they played Ole Miss, and like I said, there was like a couple guys that just really popped off screen to me. Evan Stewart was one of those guys. Judkins was the other that I was just like, good God, they're like, you put them in the NFL already. You know what I mean? Like you could put them in the NFL. So I do think that game is going to be super interesting. Penn State one, I got to see it to believe it, man. I watched that spring game. Drew Aller. I mean, I know it's a spring game, so I can't take too much. But
dude, I did the podcast rounds last year. And that was the most talented Penn State team I can remember in recent history. They were stacked to the gills. They had backup defensive ends that just had lightning quick first step. Never again. The Ohio State is favored by 3 points. I will put my paycheck on that game. Ohio State. James Franklin's just not a good. He's a good coach, not a great coach. Can't win when he needs to actually coach.
He's one of these ones that I think can like at a if he was the head coach of like Washington State or something. Yeah, Vanderbilt. Yeah, like I'm saying, like he can make that. 8-9 win team, and all those fans should build a statue for him. But when it comes to being because I was just talking about this too, man, they had some really talented rosters that they squandered opportunities, and whether it wasn't always Ohio State. I mean, Ohio State has their number, I feel like, but also like they lost to like Brett Bielema, Illinois and stuff. You know what I mean? Like they're just, for whatever reason, I don't think it's the answer there. I know they just extended him, and I feel like every Penn State fan is going furious with that. But I don't think they lose to Penn State either. I got to see it. Drew Allard also still looks like, to me, he didn't impress at all to me. Like I would have been out in the portal. I don't care what type of recruit he is. I would have went out and got somebody in the portal that could be better, because he definitely was a big part of the problems. Now maybe he takes a step forward.
I don't know what his deal is, man, because that guy was lights out in high school, bro. Like that guy was lights out in high school. That guy, I don't know what his deal is. I don't know what's going on there. I think that's coaching.
Maybe that's coaching. Yeah, it very well could be. So, but I don't see that. And then you have the Michigan game. It's in Columbus. It's not, dude. It's not going to happen this year. Michigan lost too much, man. Like I understand the defense is going to be nasty, but I just think they lost too much. And to please your audience and to please Gene Smith, there's no Stallions on the sidelines too, man. All right. All right. So no, but I'm and I'll say that actually back to the Oregon thing. If you knew you were getting Lanning, I might pull that. I might do that. If you knew Dan Lanning was down to be Ohio State's next head coach, I think I fire Ryan Day then. If back to the like 20 minutes ago we were talking about that. It has to be a home run like that, because I think Lanning is very legit. Whereas like when Cristobal was there, I was not a big fan of Cristobal. I'm still not a big fan of Cristobal. So to me, I have to be 100% sold on the football coach. And there's only a few out there that I think I'm 100% sold on.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would agree with the landing pitch. I think I would probably pull the trigger on somebody that was 75% sure on, but I understand what you're saying 100%. Let me ask you about the Michigan game. One more thing about the Michigan game. The spread's 10 points. So I'm with you. I think Ohio State smashes them, but then when I'm looking at 10 points, I go, ooh.
That's a big number for a rivalry game, man. But
and their defensive backs are light. Michigan's got very physical, athletic defensive backs. And their defensive line, I know they're going to take a step back, so I'm not going to gush over the defensive line, but that's still their dudes. They're dudes. They reload the defensive line. Their offense is going to be shit, but
that's the thing. It's like what do we expect out of the quarterback? I know they haven't named a starter yet. We think it's going to be. I'm drawing a blank on the guy's name right now, but yeah, I think I've heard Tuttle. I've heard also the backup that was a big recruit for them. I'm drawing a blank on his name too. Yes. Who's it going to be? But I tend to think rivalry game that I actually think I would lay it.
Really? Oh my God.
I think the pressure, this is like, it's like the floodgates are going to open, man. It's like what a couple years ago
when this anger, frustration.
Yeah, I really believe that, man, because what was it? It was like a couple years ago when I feel like Michigan ran for 1,000 yards at Ohio State, right?
Yeah, it was Donovan Edwards. Yeah,
the floodgates opened, and you could almost feel the pressure from the Michigan point of view. I think it's completely reversed in this scenario, and the fact you're at home at the shoe, I'm laying the 10. Let's go, because I think everyone's going to be on Michigan plus 10 too.
I will say too, like with Chip Kelly on the sidelines, Chip Kelly's not going to let them roll over. The big problem with Ohio State too is like if you look at those games, the game last year was close. 2 years ago though, everybody's like, "Oh my God, I can't believe that happened." Ohio State was in it, and then when they weren't in it, they were like, "Why am I fucking? I want to go home, coach." Like you know what I mean? Like that happened for 2 years in a row. That I don't think that happens with Chip Kelly. I don't think that they're going to roll over. I think they're going to be in it until the end. And Jim Knowles has changed his defensive philosophy. That year, too, the Donovan Edwards year was the year where he was like, 5 big plays. We allow 5 big plays. Okay, dude, well, those 5 big plays led to touchdowns. So what's your plan now?
And that's a lot of points. When you 5 touchdowns, that's a lot of points.
Yeah. Well, that's shit with the Big 12 when you're scoring 60, dude. But come on now. Yeah, so I agree with that. All right, okay. I know I've had you here for over an hour. I apologize, but I got to ask you, top 10 Buckeyes of all time.
Not from what I think are the greatest in the history of the program.
No,
my personal favorites.
Yes, for all the listeners, I told Colby before the show started, I said, do not fucking say Troy Smith. I'll be so pissed if you name Troy Smith, Archie Griffin. Give me, they don't have to be super obscure, but they can't be guys that if I ask a random person on the street, they'd name them too. Give me somebody good.
Well, I'm going to start off. I mean, there's so many good choices, but to me, you did hit on this pre-episode. To me, like the first one that does jump to mind, Jack Tatum is a guy that I have a book of his. He's the epitome of like badass dude on a football field. Yeah. It's like you just can't. It's impossible to dislike that guy, in my opinion. And so that would be easy to me, number one. But I do have some other ones. I was always I'm going to take you to the line of scrimmage. I'm a Nick Mangold guy, man. I'm a Nick Mangold guy.
Okay.
A Nick Mangold guy. Like to me, he's a complete beast. I know that one, and I know historically, I'm not going to pull up players from the 1950s and 60s that were awesome for the most part, but Mangold was a guy that I always enjoyed watching. I thought he was a great pro too, and to me, I love they don't ever get the glory, man. Nick Mangold, offensive lineman. Come on, big fan of him.
3-star recruit too, because he was from Centerville. That Centerville class had him, AJ Hawk.
Look at that class. Well.
And Mike Nugent. Maybe I can't. They were there to recruit.
Can you imagine playing that in high school?
No.
That would just be the worst. I'm like, what? Mango would be one. Look, I love.
Have you seen his sister, the deadlifter?
Yeah, man. I saw special about her.
Yeah.
Just she could just whoop my ass at any time in life. How about this? I like, I'm kind of infatuated with old school football. Players that play both ways. Chris Gamble comes to mind.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah. And to me, just I know that I wasn't a Dion fan by any means, but I could still respect the fact he could play both sides. And to me, anytime you get that good of an athlete, it's always must watch TV. That would be. I'm gonna throw that there as a 3. Oh, how about this one? Actually, what's that?
Fun Chris Gamble story. He's basically missing off the face of the earth. When he retired, he cut ties with everybody. They had the 2002 reunion team. He was the only dude that showed up. And I asked a couple of the guys, like, "Where's Chris Gamble at?" Like, I'm not going to bother him or nothing. Just curious. They're like, "We don't know. No one knows." I'm like, oh, okay.
Is he? I mean, he's just on an island somewhere. Right?
Yeah, just completely disconnected with society. Just like, I'm over.
Hey, more power to him. I want to do that when I'm done. Right. Yeah. I have one that I actually, and I'm not sure how I'd be interested to see if he's still cool with the university, because I thought there was some speculation at one point. But I grew up a big Chris Spielman fan, and to me, I thought I heard that maybe there's some bad blood between him and the university. Maybe that's just an internet nonsense. No,
he's there pretty much every game. Yeah.
Okay.
His
okay.
brother was like, his brother's kid was the lacrosse player. I don't remember. I know what you're talking about, but yeah, that's kind of water under the bridge. He had some relatives that went to the school and yada, yada, yada.
Chris Spielman, man. Let me tell you about Chris Spielman. That's just a guy that, to me, once again, back to our conversation about Ohio State. Ohio State resonates with me as a defensive school. Yep. First, they're a football school. They're one of the first football schools you think of to me in college football. But for some reason, I just pictured gritty defensive players, and Chris Spielman to me. Yes, when I was a kid, man, I would it was awesome turning it on the TV and just seeing, to me, like the epitome of football. And Chris Spielman fit that bill for Ohio State there, and then obviously off to the NFL. Even though I hated watching him in a dome because he didn't fit in a dome. He should have been. That's what I'm saying, man. He should have been like a Packer or a Cleveland Brown or something. I was like, in Detroit, it was like this. It didn't fit for me. But Chris Spielman would certainly come to mind to me as one of my all-time favorites. I mean, so many skill position players. Joey Galloway, actually. I'll be honest. Joey Galloway was one in the NFL. I mean, and I'm curious your take on this. I thought he was better in the NFL than he was in college. Like, he was good in college, but like, I remember his first couple of years in Seattle that I was like, I remember specifically, I grew up a Redskin fan, and they played the Redskins, and Joey Galloway had one of the best punt returns I've ever seen in my life. Like, it was like, Barry Sanders-esque in a way. I was just like, good God. Like, he was good in college, but I don't remember him being that good. But Joey Galloway is certainly one to me that was, and he's still involved, right? He's still involved with the university.
Yeah, when actually him and Chris Spielman both owned the Columbus Destroyers, the arena team back in the day too. Fun fact. Who was I think the deal was, who was his quarterback?
That's probably what it was.
Someone who wasn't very good.
Who followed Herb Street? It was because Hoying. It was Hoying and Jermaine, but I think they were past him. I think he was right before Hoying.
No, you know what? It might have been Hoying.
Okay.
I know that because Hoying started. I mean, Hoying almost beat out Herb Street. Yeah, it was Bobby.
Okay.
It was Bobby Hoying.
Okay. So then but I mean, he was still good in college. But to me, like, I just remember like seeing him in the NFL, and I was like, man, I almost feel like Ohio State didn't utilize all of his skills, or maybe he just got better as it went along. Well, but
if it helps, I think this will give you some kind of idea of where they were at. The offense was Ricky Dudley, Eddie George, Terry Glenn, Joey Galloway, Bobby Hoying, Orlando Pace, Chris Sanders, Pepe Pearson, Corey Stringer. So I feel like they probably kept.
How did you not get a national championship with that team? That is a national championship team right there. But I mean, look, Eddie George is an obvious one, but I'm like, to me, I was a huge fan. I love the way he ran, man. He was a very he's a bell cow back. You don't see that much these days. You know what I mean? Nope. Like, you don't see the huge, just awesome running back that no one on the field can stop. Eddie George is a very fun watch. That's one I did have on my list. But I'll be honest.
Too. He came
What's
in
that?
a loaded backfield when he was recruited in '92. That was a pretty loaded
Robert
backfield.
Smith, right?
Yeah. It had Robert Smith, Raymond Harris, Butler Binoti.
Raymond Harris was my guy. I like Raymond Harris too, man.
Yeah.
Oh, that was a great backfield. That was a great.
Yeah. He saw time as a freshman. That backfield. It's pretty impressive.
That's actually one that doesn't come up when you argue. I know a lot of people. I'll get in like dumb college football arguments, and they'll say like, "Well, Ricky Williams was part of him and Priest Holmes, and they had another guy named Sean Mitchell that was very good. They were all in the same backfield, and then they'll bring up Thurman Thomas and Barry Sanders. I think that deserves to be in that same level. Eddie George, who is it? Robert Smith, Eddie George, Raymond Harris, and Scotty Graham. Was that the other one? Good God, that's better. That's better.
Jeff Cothran was in the NFL too. Butler Binoti was also in the NFL too.
I remember Butler Binoti. Yeah. Dude, that's better. I think that's better than the ones we bring. I mean, Barry and Thurman, I understand you got two Hall of Famers, but it's better than Texas, I think.
That's like 5.
That's insane. That's insane. Yeah. Absolutely insane. But Eddie George would certainly be on my list, and I can't believe I forgot about Raymond Harris because I was a Raymond Harris fan. But another one that jumps out to me, and maybe just because I like corners, Sean Springs. I was a big Sean Springs guy. Yeah.
Awesome
he was like must watch TV to me especially when he was in college, but in the NFL too. But in college, like after watching, I want to say it was like a kickoff classic or something one year where he just kind of dominated. I was just like, I remember telling my brother, I was like, I got to watch this guy every game. I want to watch him every game. He was so nasty. I don't even know what number I'm at there, but that was number 8. That was number 8. 9 to me. Craig Krenzel, 4th and 1, baby. Dude, I like Craig Krenzel, man. And maybe, hey, you know what, man? Now that I think about it, Will Howard's kind of like Craig Krenzel, man.
Whew.
He's more athletic.
Honestly, that's pretty high praise, dude. Because Krenzel didn't do what he had to do.
He won a natty, right?
Yeah, I mean,
But dude, he's kind of like a rugged winning quarterback. You know what I mean? Like I think Will Howard actually might be more athletic than him, but Will Howard, when you watch it, the game's not sexy, but he's a fucking winner, man. Like I like his, like he's going to die for that first down when you got to die for that first down. You know what I mean? Like, and I could see a little comparison there. So Craig Krenzel's making my list because I like Craig Krenzel, and he stands out to me as just a winner. I noticed I haven't named any players like recently though, right? What's the most recent player that I named?
Nick Mangold's pretty recent.
That's true. I feel like most
Campbell, both the 2000s.
Yeah. Okay. Because I feel like my childhood always plays such a big role in anything I like. I normally circle like, hey, growing up, who was the guy that I like most? Why do I always think of like somewhere from the 80s or 90s? You know what I mean? Like,
well, I thought that's where you're getting. I was welcoming that, dude. I'm kind of surprised you didn't say like a Tim Spencer from. Well, I figured you had some. Tim Spencer
with the USFL connection.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you who was the running back after Spencer that was good in the NFL too. Vince Workman. I think Vince Workman was he. Yes, Vince Workman was a guy that I was a fan of too at Ohio State. Man, when I think about it, how many great running backs have came?
Well, Vince Workman too. Remember, he didn't even play his whole. Was it 1990? Because he was part of the Chris Carter scandal. He came on.
That's right. That's right.
He talked about it on our podcast, and it was him. Joe Cooper, who people forget about, but was also a 6th-round draft pick and was a 1,000-yard rusher at fullback, was on the cover of like Athlon Sports before he got suspended for taking that money. But he was basically like, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but basically the reason that it kind of fell apart is because Chris Carter was dipping his toe in multiple agents' shoes. Like if he would have just taken money from one agent,
everybody would have found out. It would have been okay.
Yeah, but Chris Carter was like, mine.
I mean, Chris Carter would be easy to put in there too, because I've seen some of the best catches I've ever seen by Chris Carter. But
his quarterback was Jim Crusados too, so it's like Dude, no pretty balls there.
Who was he? Was he in college the same time as Jeff Graham, or was that later?
Vince Workman?
Yeah. Is that the Jeff Graham team too?
Jeff Graham, I think his last year was 89. Well, yeah, because Vince Workman was suspended most of the 90s.
So somewhere right around there.
Was injured. Then Jeff Graham was injured most of 89. Bobby Olive was the leading receiver, but he was the leading receiver in 88, I think.
Bobby Olive was my guy, man. I like Bobby Olive. Yeah.
Well, I figured you know the CFL Arena Football connection there, too.
You know it. Bobby Olive was the man. Nate Clements was one that I loved watching. To me, anytime you can get a physical corner, I think he was like underrated how physical he was. Like as far as come up against the run, one of the things I know, like Dion always steals the glory of like the best corner ever. But you could run at Dion, and he didn't like to come up and make the tackle. I always respected corners that could come up, and Nate Clements to me was a guy that could come up.
They had a good run of defensive backs that could get quite nasty with you because it was Clements in 2000, and then it was Anton Winfield 98, and he was
Winfield was nasty too, man. Yeah.
Damon Moore was right in there too. And then they had a white safety that was like all Big Ten 3 years in a row. Hauser or something, I can't remember. Rob Kelly. Rob Kelly was
yes, dude. And I'm leaving out so many linebackers. I mean, they were so nasty in the '90s with Katzenmoyer and Craig Powell, and they always had guys.
I wish NIL was around with Craig Powell because that guy left way too early. That's kind of a Baron Browning situation there. When you go back and watch his highlights and shit, they didn't know where to put him because he was just so fast and so strong. Alonzo Spellman was the same way. When you go back and watch that dude's highlights, woo! Yeah, dude was like 40 years old and came back and played a random season of arena football and dominated. What would they say? He went to like a mental hospital and walked out just naked in Chicago with his dong hanging out. Like,
dude, I've done that. But no, that was just a bar. It wasn't a hospital. But no, man. But I actually would like. I should have done an even deeper dive because I mean, when you think about how many great linebackers, a lot of people probably, that's a question that gets asked all the time. Linebacker, you. Penn State tries to own it. I think Ohio State could potentially. I know Penn State fans love to say it's linebacker, you.
Yeah, but no. Dude. We didn't even talk about Tom Cousineau, who was the number 1 pick in the NFL draft. Yeah, we didn't talk about Randy Gradishar. We didn't talk about Marcus Merrick, who's the career touchdown, another USFL guy. Who knows what he's done in the NFL? You know what I mean? We didn't touch on a lot of those guys.
It's funny that and even DBU. I feel like DBU doesn't. I feel like LSU. They try to say it's LSU. I feel like, man, you can I think I could name more Ohio State defensive backs than LSU defensive backs. Historically, you know what I mean? Mike Doss was a beast. You don't even have hard-hitting safeties anymore. They've ruined the sport. Mike Doss was the man. Mike Doss, dude, you go over the middle against Mike Doss, you're paid for it, man. Yeah. God, I miss that football. I just miss hard-hitting safeties. Like honestly, like that whole position's like wiped out. You know what I mean? Like you can still have great safeties, but like you used to have the intimidator. Like, I Dave Duerson and stuff. You know what I mean? Like you had guys that just their job. You would think twice about anything over the middle, and it's a shame. Mike Dawson. He was like the last of that era, really. Like right around there. Yeah. Was Marty Ohio State? No. Marty who am I thinking of in the 90s that they had at safety? I said Marty Carter, but I'm thinking who.
Sean Gale
for the Bears. Yes, because Marty Carter played for the Bears. Sean Gale was a beast. He was an absolute. Yeah, Doug Plank. Damn, dude, this is DB. Yeah. I'm gonna go ahead and say it. Ohio State DBU. Get this LSU nonsense out of here. All right. I mean, I actually think, dude, when you really think about it, I don't even think that it's even close. I don't even think it's even close. LSU.
It really made what's really upsetting too is when you go back and you look at because I'll get on YouTube and watch old games and I'll see a guy like Derrick Ross, for instance. I'm like, God damn, that guy's good. Yeah. What happened? Why do I not? And it's because he left with a year of eligibility. The guy left as like a redshirt sophomore. It's like, dude, Could you imagine what happened, man? You know,
NIL, man, it's a game changer. It's a game changer on both sports.
Before I let you go, you know about the Sean Gale like the murder thing?
Yes,
right?
I saw one day I was watching like Forensic Files, or I don't know. My wife was watching, like, might have been Dateline, and that came up. And what can I say? I mean,
right.
You know,
well, no,
it's hell of a good football player, though.
It's not. I'm laughing not because it's not because it's funny, but I'm laughing because there was a part of the investigation where they thought he was the killer because he was being really sketchy about his phone, right? He was ended up being completely innocent, had nothing, no involvement at all. It was like a girl that he was. But the reason he was being sketchy is because he was banging like 20 other women. So like, he didn't want anybody to see his phone because he was banging like 20 other women.
I tell you, that probably started at Ohio State, and he's just like, just living my life. All right. Sean Gale, I'll be honest, anyone in Tecmo Bowl, to me, even if they did the murder, is acquitted of all charges. But in my mind, I'm joking. But no, Sean Gale was the man, and that's crazy though. Who killed her? Who killed her again? Because for a second I thought it was
his side pieces. It was one of his side pieces.
Oh,
he was messing around with her, and he told her that she was the one, and she wasn't. She was just a side piece, and she found out who the actual main piece was, and she was psycho. And then he was like, it basically took them to be like, dude,
that's right. I do remember it. Yeah. That's right.
He was like, here's my phone. Here's my phone. Take it. Please don't get in jail. Yeah.
Dude, that's insane. That's such a crazy story. That is such a crazy story. Yeah. I mean, but dude, how many great defensive backs? I don't know. Ohio State, to me, I mean, I know Miami had a good run there, but for some reason people always say LSU. I'm sorry, I'll take Ohio State over that all day.
The thing about Ohio State is you can name defensive backs from, I mean, it goes so far back. There's a key defensive back in every decade. I mean, it's kind of the same with wide receiver when you go back and look like Paul Warfield all the way to
No way. I forgot about that.
A little bit of a gap there in the 70s and 80s. Well, no, because you had Doug Donnelly, White Lightning. You know what I mean? Like, you had a couple studs here and there, but I don't know.
Dude, I mean, I know USC also has a great defensive back list, but they haven't produced one in a minute. But they had for a minute there, like in the 80s. I know they had. I was talking to somebody. Who did I interview? I think it was Jeff Fisher. That was telling me that he was a part of the secondary, but he was like the fourth team. And they had Dennis Smith, who was a beast for the Broncos, Joey Browner, who was a beast for the Vikings,
dude,
in the NFL, and Ronnie Lott. And you're just like, what? You're like, wow. Can you imagine playing that team? Like, unbelievable. And now they're a Big Ten school. Let's go, right? How do you feel about that, by the way?
I agree with your. I don't like it. I don't like it. College football is a regional game. I got in an argument with a friend because he was saying that bowls are stupid, and I got really aggressive. What are you talking about? College bowls are great. Fuck you. You know what I mean? Like, because it's like that's your old school. But it's one of those things where I've just accepted it. It's kind of like the NIL thing where it's like, all right, TV companies run the shit now, right? Like, if I want this to continue to be successful, this is how it goes. You can look back. I kind of justify with, well, the realignment's always happened. Look at Penn State; they were independent forever. Look at SMU. So I kind of justify it in my head. But you just kind of make peace with it. The only thing that I right now that is on the table that I'm really going to be upset about is if they do away with walk-ons. If they do away with walk-ons, that's really
come on. I mean, why?
I don't know.
I mean, there's this movie called Rudy. Everyone should go watch. But yeah, man, I don't know. I'm not the biggest fan of it, but football is football. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I wonder long term if it's the smartest solution for some of those schools. We'll see. I think we're at such an interesting point in the sports history.
The problem is, I agree with you. The problem is what you and I see as successful doesn't fucking matter. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I can't remember.
TV contract is what matters, right? And they're just like, this is our version of success.
Yeah.
So
you think they give a shit if they win 6 games, they get $1 billion? Washington State can go undefeated this year. They're not going to. No one's going to give a shit. You know what I mean? Like
I was actually let's talk about this for 1 minute, and then I got to go. But Washington State, hear me out here.
Yeah,
they are a group of 5 now, or whatever you want to call it. They play like 3. Yeah, whatever P2, so group of 6, right?
Yeah.
They play 3 or 4 Power 5 still though. They play Oregon State obviously because that's their conference game, and then they play I think Texas Tech. They get Texas Tech this year, and maybe it's Cal. They get like 3 or 4. So my thing is they're going to have the best strength of schedule. So Liberty plays nobody. So in a way, I think it could be really hilarious if Washington State makes a 12-team playoff before Washington.
That's
I think it could. It could because they could go 10-2. They're going to beat some of these. I think they're better than a lot of these Mountain West schools that they're going to play. And then I'm like, wait, they get Washington week 2 this year, right? The Apple Cup's week 2, I think it is, or week 3. And Washington lost like 95% of their roster. So I'm like, they could get Washington. And then I'm like, wait, they get Texas Tech. Now who knows? But it's in Pullman, Leach Bowl. And I'm like, wait, if they go 10-2, their strength of schedule is so much. Liberty doesn't play any P5s or P4s. How hilarious would that be if everyone's feeling sad for Washington State? And I mean everybody, including myself. How funny is it going to be if they like get the berth every year though?
Dude, it's really possible. It really is possible. Yeah. It really is possible.
Yeah. Anyway, cracked me up.
Yeah, and that's the kind of stuff that I think about too. And then there's always somebody that's like better at math that goes, still no one's gonna give a shit. And I'm like, oh, okay.
True.
I guess when they lose in the first round of Notre Dame, like I guess you're right. But like I'll remember. I'll fucking remember.
It matters to me. All right.
Yeah, that's right. But well, I'll let you guys. I had you for an hour and a half, dude. I'm sorry for taking up so much time. It's always good talking to you, dude. It's always good talking to you, man. I appreciate you coming on the show. I'm definitely going to check out Stadium Heads. I'm going to definitely keep listening to UFL Gambling Podcast because that's just a pure money-making comedic relief. 2 hours every week. So love it to death. I need to check out the CFL podcast. Haven't gotten there yet, but I do appreciate you coming on the show. I'll stop wasting your time. Where can people get you and follow you and all that good stuff?
I'm on Twitter at TheColbyD, a part of the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. And like I said, Stadium Heads, the college football experience, the FCS college football experience. Yes, I'm still talking about Valpo, baby. All right. The Crusaders, though. The Crusaders. Thanks for having me on the show, brother. Always a pleasure. Beacon, get the hell out of here. All right. No, I appreciate you, man. And always a pleasure, man. I'll come back whenever you want, man.
Awesome. All right. And you can follow me on Twitter at JoshKeatley16. Definitely check out my work at Buckeyes Wire. We're doing recruiting articles there and all that good stuff. Definitely hit us up, and we are